Welcome to Across the Arc, where we dive into the extraordinary work of Equity Arc members. This episode features our new programs manager, Jade Garcia. She's no stranger to Equity Arc or Pathways work since her prior role was as a student navigator and community manager at the Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative. She's less than a month into her current role at Equity Arc, but she's already hit the ground running. She's helped work on the Pathways Census Report, she's been connecting with our Pathways Collective members, and is already strategizing our collective next steps. This conversation will let you get to know Jade. You'll learn about her musical and professional background, her passion for Pathways programs and supporting Black and Brown musicians along their musical journey, and she'll share about the vision that she has for her new role at Equity Arc. I'd love to hear about your musical upbringing. What music did you grow up listening to, and how did you start playing clarinet?
Absolutely. So I grew up listening to a lot of different music. My parents adored every different genre, every different style, and I specifically remember that my dad had this massive CD case of every different artist, every type of music that you can imagine. But my favorite was always salsa and bachata. So my parents are Dominican immigrants. We spoke Spanish at home, and I adored Marc Anthony, Juan Luis Guerra, Celia Cruz, and I still listen to that music to this day just to sort of feel at home and feel relaxed and connect back with that part of myself. And then as far as my start with clarinet goes, it sort of happened on accident. My band director in middle school knew my big sister and knew that she was good at the French horn, so pulled me out of whatever class I might have been in and put me in beginning band in the woodwind section. And I found the clarinet. And I just immediately fell in love with it in a really simple way. It was just something that I had fun doing and I was really curious about. And I remember just playing Jingle Bells for my parents 20 times a day because I was so proud of it. And it really just wasn't any work. It was just something that I did for fun. And then I guess it ends up paying off, even if it's sort of on accident.
Love that. You started playing clarinet and then you went off to college to study that. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about your journey from college and what made you go into arts administration?
Yeah. So I didn't realize until much later that admin was a part of my work all the time. I always joined the student council, and I was band president in middle school and in high school, and I did leadership roles in college and created different programming, and it was just something that came naturally to me. I just wanted to put things in place that I wanted to see. I wanted to fill gaps in curriculum and connect with people in different ways, so I would just create the opportunities that I wanted for myself, for my friends, and for my community. So it started sort of informally, just doing different little projects. And then when I was in my master's at Roosevelt University, I started in the Center for Arts Leadership, which was our equivalent of a music entrepreneurship center. And I worked really closely with Allegra Montanari, who is a wonderful mentor of mine. And she got me started on some bigger projects and gave me more responsibility, eventually put me in charge of a student team. And I was working really closely with the admin in higher education, with the deans and teachers to put together different programming for the students. And that's when it became more of a really formal part of my life and work that I was really committed to. And then, of course, in 2020, George Floyd, everything sort of came together for me. I was really angry about a lot of things. I was very frustrated about injustice and the ways that it's reflected in the orchestral world, in this world that I love and that I found myself in, that I loved my art so deeply in. So I decided I wanted to do something. And sort of the only way I knew how at that point was to put together programs that might help someone.
I love that. It makes more and more sense, your connection and affinity for Pathways. But could you share about how you got connected with Pathways in Chicago?
Right, yeah, so I was at the end of my master's career. I realized that I definitely wanted to do administration in a way. I wanted to be involved in some sort of activism. I wanted to do something to change things. And I was looking at jobs and found CMPI. I immediately became sort of obsessed with it, and everyone in my life knew that I was applying to this job, and we were all manifesting that it was going to happen. We pretended that I got it as soon as I saw the job description, and I worked really hard to prepare for those interviews, and I ended up being hired, and then was mentored by Adrienne Thompson and James Hall through my work there, and really just fell in love with Pathways work and the depth of engagement that we have with our students. It was just a really sincere form of community engagement that I had never experienced before.
That's awesome. Well, for anyone who isn't familiar with Chicago Musical Pathways Initiative, could you share a bit about the work that y'all do?
Yeah, so Pathways programs are intensive training programs for students from underrepresented backgrounds. Chicago Musical Pathways serves students of color, students from low-income households, and first-generation students. We work really closely with the students to remove any barriers that might stand between them and their ultimate goal of doing music as a career, going into music for college. And that can mean a number of different things. Maybe there's financial barriers that we help them get through. Maybe they just need a little bit more education about the application process. Maybe there's a little bit of counseling that needs to happen with the parents, with the family, to understand how to best support the student. No matter what it is, we're going to work to find a solution and help get them to whatever their goal is.
So that's a lot.
Yes, we do a lot.
Yeah, so as a student navigator, can you speak specifically about that role and your work with musicians? Like, what did your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so it was a lot of sort of basic admin and running a program. So we had a lot of programming that was for all of the students collectively, and we work hard to connect with community partners and everything like that, getting more opportunities for the students. But my favorite part of it, and sort of what my main focus was, is just working with the students and families really closely. At the most, I had 30 students and families that I was in charge of specifically. And that means that I was their main advisor, their main connection to the program and to whatever else they might need. So it was my job to understand their interests, understand their passions, understand any barriers that they might have, and just know them, to know who they are and what they need, how they work, because we're all so different and we all have different ways of accomplishing our goals. And I worked hard to understand each of my students and honestly just sort of be a friend for them, because I think we all need that. We all just sort of need to be heard and valued. Yeah. So that was the best part of it by far for me. I really loved working with all of those students.
That's awesome. Now you get to work with a lot many more.
Oh, yes. So many.
Which kind of transitions us into talking a bit about, the National Collective for Musical Pathways and Equity Arc as a whole. We know you've been involved with Equity Arc for a while through your work with CMPI. Could you share a little bit about what made you interested in working here with Equity Arc and your general experiences with us so far?
Yeah. So really throughout my whole career, throughout all this time that I've been in music, I have been thinking of different ways to increase representation, to welcome folks that look like me, to welcome Black and brown folks, to welcome folks who might not have the money to be able to afford the music education that they want to take part in, because it just opens so many doors for a person, whether that's in self-discovery and finding out more about their own identity, or literally traveling the world and being invited to go to play with different orchestras or to study abroad somewhere. Music just brings so many opportunities that I feel like a lot of people deserve access to. So I was really excited about Equity Arc because I'm a big fan of collaboration and recognize that that's the best way to get to our goal. And Equity Arc is doing that on a huge scale. It's a national scale with starting at early childhood, going to professional. Everyone is involved and everyone's trying to find solutions actively. And I wanted to be involved in that. I was working in Chicago and working with a community of students on the ground level there. And now I can work to find bigger solutions and to be really strategic about the way that we support students. So I feel like I'm just more connected now to the greater ecosystem and can have more of an impact that way. And I also just love a challenge. So I'm excited to come up with creative solutions and really question the things that we might be stuck thinking.
Yeah, that's good. And, we're recording this at the Building Bridges Symposium in Atlanta, which is, of course, one of, I think, your first ways in to meeting a lot of folks in person, hearing what those challenges are and maybe coming up with some ideas. So I'm just curious if you have any takeaways or anything that you're especially or specifically excited about, implementing.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm excited about getting efficient, which is a very administrative answer, but it's true. I think there's a lot of ideas that we have. There's a lot of kids that we want to serve. There's a lot of musicians that want to be involved, and it'll be important to be really thoughtful about where we're putting our energies. So I say this because Pathways programs are doing a lot of really great work and putting together a lot of programs that are very useful to their families. So how can we put on a program nationally that can save everyone a date in their calendar to do something else? How can we put together all of our resources to benefit causes that we're all involved in?
I mean, it makes sense. We're
Right.
talking about collaboration,
Right.
and that we don't have to work in silos necessarily, and maybe
Right.
there's something that one program is doing that can benefit another, or something even EquiArc can offer that can benefit all Pathways folks. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's been something we've been talking about, and it's that question of capacity, and
Yes.
now we have you here. And it's a beautiful thing.
Well said. Yeah, I think something really great can come from just working together and making sure that we're putting together programming that benefits everyone's interests so that we can all just focus on the music a little bit more.
Exactly. And I mean, this kind of opens the larger can of worms. We're speaking vaguely about things, but there's very specific pieces of information that all Pathways students, and honestly any musician actually, needs to know. And there's a lot of information gaps, especially when we're talking about like auditioning or what it takes to get to the next stage of musical development. And so you're talking about focusing on the music, which is like, private lessons, like going to summer study, making sure you're ready, musically. The technical preparation is there, and we know Pathways programs do a lot more when offering mentorship and things like that. But that's something I think we think a lot about also at EquiArc. How can we make sure that people know what they need to know to get to where they want to go? And I feel like that's the big question, and a big part of that is listening. Like, what are the people saying? So I love that you're doing the check-ins, and we're gonna have a lot to talk about, a lot to continue to explore and implement. So it's exciting things in store.
It truly is.
Well, another piece of Pathways work is involved around data collection. We just finished our census for fiscal year 2023, and you caught the tail end of that, but we're super helpful in helping synthesize some of that information. I'm curious if you could speak broadly, about the project, if there are any highlights that stood out to you.
So each Pathways program is really individualized to the needs of the community, of the city, and of the students. And that's reflected in the data. There's a lot of similarities across the programs. Everyone prioritizes private lessons, ensemble experience, instrument funding and access, things like this that we all need to be able to study music effectively. But I noticed that each program has come up with creative solutions to better support their fellows. So, for example, at Chicago Musical Pathways, there's a wonderful mentorship program where Chicago area musicians are working with fellows to advise them on their career, but also just serve as a friend and an ear, someone that's already in the field that's an advocate for them.
Yes. So, yeah, You're absolutely right. All different Pathways programs are unique in its own. And it was an interesting process to try to put it together in a way that could be structured, with some of those similarities, but also, like you said, highlighting those differences. And so we got a lot of good qualitative details, and we will be sharing out the full report December 13th. But we also got some quantitative details that really highlighted, for me at least, how much it costs to fund Pathways, how many resources are part of it. So I would be interested for you to speak a little more about, that sustainability piece of Pathways.
Right. So the Pathways programs, they are expensive to do. It's really good work, and that requires an investment in a number of ways. So we figured out that the average cost of a year of programming for a fellow is $9,500, and program budgets are big. There's a big cost that comes with supporting private lessons, instruments, special guest clinicians, master classes, all of the programming that these programs offer. And staff time is a huge commitment as well, because to work really closely with students and to serve as a close advisor with them and to offer individualized curriculum for each student requires a lot of time. And this is reflected in the fact that Pathways programs are oftentimes small. They have a small student body, and they often have a couple of staff members. 3 is the most in the country. And there's a lot of different people that work with a Pathways program. So a Pathways manager might work with a community orchestra within a music school, within a symphony, and they might serve multiple roles while serving as an advisor for the students. So it requires a commitment of time, energy, and money to effectively do the program and to effectively remove barriers. And really what I see is that classical music is expensive. It's exclusive. It's hard to get a good instrument. It's hard to get enough money to pay for a lesson with one of these top-notch teachers. It's just a very expensive profession. And to give folks access to that, folks who come from low-income households, it requires a large investment from the community. And all of this is required so that the students can focus on their music, so that they can find that excellence on their instrument and not worry about the other things.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big undertaking, a huge responsibility. And, with the funding landscape, with the shift that has been going on, it's becoming even more crucial, I think, to get this information. And we're also seeing more and more, of course, where Pathways alumni are going as well. Like at this Building Bridges, seeing the talent development program, it's been going on for 30 plus years. And their alumni are doing amazing things. And I think all of them pretty much attribute their success from their start with TDP and the resources that they had to provide. And we hear that, all over, because we have more and more connections to Pathways. And I know with CMPI, y'all are how old? Like 5 years old? Or
yeah, we're celebrating our 5th anniversary soon.
Yeah. And so even still, you're seeing like the schools they're getting into, and I don't know if you have any like anecdotes to share about some alumni or things like that you've been observing.
Absolutely. It's so much fun at the end of the school year to see where Pathways Fellows end up. There's Pathways Fellows at every major conservatory, every great music school in the country. And everyone finds the school that's the best fit for them. Everyone finds the program that's the best fit for them, and that's the most important part. But what's really excited about seeing TDP is that it is the oldest Pathways program, and it's just a really beautiful proof of concept. It works. Yes. Folks find great success in whatever they decide to do, and that doesn't necessarily need to be getting a seat at a great orchestra. And of course that's awesome, and I'm here to celebrate that when it happens too. But there is great power in the skill building and the reflection that is required to study music at a high level. At a young age, we're asking these students to dedicate themselves to their instrument, to practice, to study, and in that they're dedicating themselves to their own work and to finding greater purpose. They build a lot of skills in organization, in planning, in speaking to people, in being just good citizens of the world. And they're diving into all of this before they get to college. They're working hard towards these incredible goals at 16. Right?
Yes. It's so impressive. Like, my first time meeting the fellows at the National Pathways Festival, I was amazed. Like, and you're how old? Just speaking just so proficiently, and how they play as well. It was really, really wonderful. And we heard, from Jaya, who's a senior at the talent development program, and
incredible.
it was awesome. Like, she didn't have any prepped question lists or anything. She was just going off the cuff, and it's a great skill to have. As they mentioned, it transfers. So no matter what students do, like, these are the skills that they're going to be able to carry with them. So it's really cool. I'm trying to remember some other things that we pulled from the census data. A lot of it was also on program requirements, expectations, and also family engagement, which is all huge things, and they all kind of intersect with each other, just how important that is. And of course, you are interacting a lot with families in your work, but you have heard about it also with the collective, and so I'm curious if you have any thoughts to share about that aspect.
Yeah, the family support is so important. I remember at one of my first days in Chicago Musical Pathways, Adrian Thompson gave me a call and gave me an orientation to the home visits that we do, where we visit each family in their home and talk about music, talk about CMPI, get them oriented to the program, welcome them into the family. And she said to me that students are most resilient when they have their parents' support. That parent support is so crucial. And we often talked in CMPI about how important it is to educate families on classical music, on the career, because when they're in school, when they're at this wonderful conservatory a couple of years in, and they're having a really difficult moment, they're calling their mom, they're calling their dad, they're calling their caregiver, their sibling, and they are their main support. So it's important that we loop them in. And we make a big point in Pathways programs to educate families on everything having to do with classical music and the commitment, so that the students have a strong support system that lasts through their whole career and is right there in their home. If a parent understands why it's important to practice, that student is going to be better at practicing.
Right.
If the parent understands why there is such a high level of expectation in the field, and sort of what that playing level needs to be at, what that commitment level needs to be at, they're going to help communicate that to the student and serve as a support right in the home.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a good point about that transition too, because they're not always going to have the significant amount of support that Pathways offers once they get into college. And that's something we talk about too, especially because we are looking at every stage of musical development. So that's a good way to tackle a piece of it by involving families. Do you have any thoughts on that collegiate side of things, that transition, and how colleges can also better support their musicians of color that enter those institutions?
Sure. I think creating space for folks is so important. I think about when I was at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I did my undergrad, and we had the Diverse Musicians Alliance, we called it DEMA, and every Friday morning we would meet in this room in the music building, and our advisor would bring a stack of muffins, a pot of coffee, and we would all sit down. Maybe we were studying a score, maybe we were just talking and hanging out, but that time was so precious to me, and it just brought me a comfort and a safety that I needed so much. And I didn't realize until a couple of years into school, just how uncomfortable I was being the only brown person in a lot of rooms I was in. Boulder is very much primarily white, and in the music school and any of the classes I took outside of the music school, I was often the only person of color or one of a couple. And I felt very uncomfortable when I first got there. Really, my whole first year, I was just sort of off, and I didn't know what it was until I sort of got the vocab and found the understanding that for the first time in my life, I was just really othered. And it was really difficult for me. I grew up in Vegas, and it was very diverse, and I was with a lot of Latino folks and a lot of Black and brown folks of every background. And I was sitting in this place where I just felt very out of it. And finding that community and just leaning into it, making lifelong friends, that really meant the world to me. So in short, yes, space creation is so important. To create space for different folks, to have advocates for them, and to educate faculty and staff on anti-racism, and why it is that orchestras in classical music have been primarily white for so long. We need to understand why these people are excluded.
Right. Yeah, a lot of your background in that transition is very much similar or even the same as mine, growing up in San Antonio.
Right.
Huge Latino community as well. Also very multicultural. And then when I went to my institution in Indiana, it was very white. And it was very isolating, especially my first year. And my second year, similar as you, that's when I was like, I am going to plug in to the Black community here. There was maybe like 20 of us in the music school, so I went outside of it, the African American Arts Institute, and I did a internship there in their marketing department. That is hosted in the Neil Marshall Black Cultural Center. A lot of us gravitated there because of that safe space that there was to experience Black culture and to be among each other and eat soul food, and it was just an amazing time. And so I love seeing that there are more music schools that are popping up with Black student unions, because there is a unique experience that, you know, Black students who are classical musicians have and can relate to. And so I love it, and I hope that we could do more and work more in that area as well. So I have just 2 more questions for you. I'm wondering if we can go back to Pathways and see if you have any advice that you'd offer to anyone that's wanting to start programs. We've heard from a few people at even Building Bridges that there are more and more organizations looking to start Pathways programs. So if you have any general advice that you would share just for anyone looking to start one.
First of all, how exciting.
Yes.
I'm very excited about it. But my advice, in short, is to listen to the students and listen to the families. They're who you are trying to serve. I think that Pathways programs are very essential, but they require a commitment that folks need to be aware of when they start a program. We need staff who are willing to dedicate time and to be stable supports for the students that are involved. And we need to be very clear about what the goal and mission of the Pathways program is.
Right.
When you're talking to the students, you cannot be concerned with numbers, statistics, whatever else, and trying to, look good on a pamphlet, maybe, or something like that, maybe some tokenism. We cannot be concerned about pleasing those who came before. We need to be concerned with the success of these students that are in front of you, their comfort, their happiness, and their goals.
Yeah.
So it's really just important to listen to them and to form your program around their needs and their wants.
Love that. Well, Our last question I ask everybody. What is your vision for the future of classical music?
It's gonna be beautiful. I think very often about how cool it is, really, to look at the history of music, to recognize that music and art have been present since the beginning of time, since the beginning of any record keeping, anything that we're able to reference, right? And it's always reflected the people around it. It's reflected the communities. It's reflected their pains, their happiness, their love. It's been reflective of humanity throughout all time. And it's been exclusionary folks for a long time too. So the future of classical music is colorful. It's full of a lot of different voices. It's welcoming to a number of people, and it's created by the community that it serves. The orchestras are reflective of the towns that they're in, of the cities that they're in, and the audiences are the same. And they're performing music that is loved by all, and that is written maybe a little more recently, or maybe it's older, but the important part is that it's welcoming of all, and that it's reflective of the desires of the community.
Yeah. That is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I love to see it, and excited to have you on board.
Excited to be here.
Well, thanks so much, Jade, for sharing your insights. I think people are going to learn a lot from you, from not just this episode, but in the way that you're going to be working very closely with folks to help make their programs better and more impactful.
Thank you, Paula.
That concludes our spotlight on Jade Garcia, Equity Arc's newest team member. If you're interested in learning more about Pathways, send her an email at jade@equityarc.org or visit our website, equityarc.org. Until next time, let's continue to make progress toward racial equity across the Arc.